Hello everyone, what is up and welcome back to the channel iRumors. In today's video, we are going to be comparing all aspects of the 2020 Intel Macbook Air to the M4 14-inch MacBook Pro. So technically the last Intel Macbook Air to the latest Apple Silicon M4 MacBook Pro. This video I'm mainly doing it for all of you who are having an Intel MacBook Air and if you are contemplating whether to upgrade or not. Because Apple Silicon is much more effective in terms of power usage, in terms of the processing speed and everything like that. Apple Silicon is just leagues above the Intel MacBooks. But what are the real world differences? We are now comparing M2 to the M4, the M3 to the M4. Even the M2 to M4 comparisons are not really a lot. I just want to take a look back, revisit and see the MacBook that was released 5 years ago. So this was a 2020 Intel MacBook and now it's 2025. So let's revisit. Even though those MacBooks are not as fast compared to the new Apple Silicon MacBooks, a lot of people are still using them because they are just as good. Because in the end, it's all MacBooks, right? But before we start off with any test formally, we got to take a look at the technical specifications and the hardware of both the laptops. We got to know what is the technical specifications that we are comparing it with. We can't just be blindly comparing it, but of course I will definitely try not to bore you guys with it. So let's take a quick look at the technical specifications before we move on officially to the testings. The Intel MacBook Air is having a 1.1 GHz dual-core Intel Core i3 processor, and the graphics is the Intel Iris Plus graphics with 8 GB of RAM, and it's having a 256GB SSD. Of course, 256GB doesn't mean you get the full 256, it's a 250, so it's a 256GB SSD. As for the M4 MacBook Pro, it has 16 GB of RAM followed by a 1TB of SSD. And the chip, the Apple M4 chip, is not the M4 Pro or the M4 Max, it's just the Apple M4 chip. On the 2020 Intel MacBook Air, it's a very thin MacBook as we can see here. On the left side, we've got two USB-C ports, and on the right side, we've got just one headphone jack. Any other ports that you want to use, you gotta attach a USB-C hub to it. But that's not the case on the M4 MacBook Pro. On the left side, we've got MagSafe. We can solely use it just for charging, and we've got two USB-C ports followed by a headphone jack on the left side. And on the right side, we've got a HDMI, another USB-C port, and SD card reader. And even if we use two USB-C ports at the same time, we still have another one to be used on the right side. So that just makes connectivity much easier on the M4 MacBook Pro. Yeah, you can definitely use HDMI and all the other ports that are available on the M4 MacBook Pro, on the M1 MacBook Pro also. It's fully supported, but the problem is you gotta get an adapter in order for you to use it. There's one thing even a dongle that can't get is the USB-C port on the right side on the MacBook. On the Intel MacBook Air, two USB-C ports are both also are situated on the left side. So if you want one on the right side, there is no way you can get it even if you attach another dongle. Having another USB-C port on the right side is definitely another convenience, because not only can you just use it for transfers, you can even use it for charging. Just plug in a USB-C cable at the right side and you can charge your MacBook as well. So that just opens up to a lot of possibilities which the 2020 Intel MacBook Air does not have. I want to compare and let's take a look together at how fast is the newest M4 MacBook Pro compared to the last Intel MacBook Air. So without further ado, let's get started right into comparing it. Here I've got both the MacBooks right in front of me. This is the 2020 Intel MacBook Air followed by the M4 MacBook Pro that you all know. Firstly, let's open the MacBook up, and now I've got both the MacBooks turned on and the brightness is at full. And the first thing that you can notice from the MacBooks is M4 MacBook Pro's screen is actually much brighter than the Intel MacBook, because it's an LED screen and this is an OLED screen, and we can clearly see the differences. But first, before we talk about anything else, the first thing that we gotta do is to run Geekbench. Here I've got Geekbench open on both the computers, so let's run the CPU benchmark first, followed by the GPU benchmarks, and let's take a look at the results together. And the results are out, and I just want to say that the MacBook Air, it took significantly longer, about double the time, to complete this Geekbench. Now let's take a look at the score. You would have already seen the single core. The MacBook Air 2020 scored 1275 for multi-core, whereas the M4 MacBook Pro scored 3698, and for the multi-core 1948, whereas here is a 14895. That is a huge difference. Total compute score for the MacBook Air 2020 is 2798, whereas the M4 MacBook Pro is 37524. The M4 MacBook Pro is just leagues apart. Here I've got Speedometer 3.0 opened up. This is a web browsing benchmark that shows how responsive the web application is. So this is basically to simulate everyday web browsing. So let's run that and let's see how efficient both the MacBooks are. Start test on both of it together. Let's start. Here we've got the scores. 2020 Intel MacBook Air scored 8.15, whereas the M4 MacBook Pro scored 34.2. As we can see here from the graph, the Intel MacBook Air is closer towards the lower end range, whereas the M4 MacBook Pro, even though it's not the higher range, it is slightly in the middle range. So technically this is more than twice as fast as the Intel MacBook. Here I've got a GPU benchmark. This mainly targets the graphics on the computer. Even though we did run Geekbench, it's better to run a GPU benchmark on its own, and I feel like this benchmark is really pushes both the computers to their limits. We are just going to be running a 1-minute stress test, and we're going to see how both the laptops perform. So here I'm going to click start test right now, and now let's wait the results to be out. Okay, the results are really surprises me. We can see that the Intel MacBook Air has a maximum FPS of 15.2 and the max is about close to 20, and the minimum is close to 11.7. But on the M4, we can see that the FPS is about 11.3 and the minimum is close to 10 and the maximum is about 12.2. Really surprising results. Wasn't expecting Intel to perform better, but logically speaking, I feel like maybe benchmark is not optimized because there's no way an Intel MacBook Air can perform better than a M4 MacBook Pro. So something is wrong here. Now let's move on to some real world testing. The next component that we are testing is the read and write speed on the SSD. So I've got Blackmagic disk speed test opened up right over here. And I'm going to start the test at the same time. Here you can see that it's writing at a speed of 989 megabytes per second, whereas and the M4 MacBook Pro is running about 3329. That's about 3 gigabytes per second. And you can see the read speed is just 1.4 gigabytes per second, and whereas the read on the M4 MacBook Pro is about 2.8 gigabytes per second. The read and write speed on the SSDs are technically double, but we've got to consider the factor that this is a 1TB SSD, whereas this is a 256GB of SSD. So it does have those slight variations, but overall the SSD on the M4 MacBook Pro is much faster. We can clearly see here it's continuously running with this speed test, and we are having close to 3 times higher read and write speed on the M4 MacBook Pro. But that won't be enough. We need to test it out in real life. We're going to do some real world testing, and for that we got to transfer some files over. Here I've got a file. This is a 1.4 gigabytes file. This is just my YouTube video, so I'm just going to transfer it over to the thumb drive that I've got plugged in over here, and we're going to be testing out how fast it copies over. As usual, 2 different phones for 2 different laptops. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to copy over the files. The results are out, and it's practically negligible. I transferred the files over. It took the 2020 MacBook Air just took 4 seconds more than the M4 MacBook Pro to copy a technically 2 gigabytes of file over. So the result, so not that much of difference when you compare it like that, but not that much of difference in file transfers. Now let's compare the webcam on both these laptops. The M4 MacBook Pro has a 1080p webcam with center stage. The 2020 MacBook Air just has a 720p camera. So let's take a look at both the cameras right now. Take a look at it, let me know how is it in the comments below. Listen to the microphone quality, take a look at the video, take a look at the 720p camera quality, compare it with the M4 MacBook Pro one, and let me know how is it in the comments below. So this is me recording from the front-facing camera of the 14-inch MacBook Pro. Take a look at it, let me know how is it in the comments below. Here I've got a HDR video playing, but the MacBook Air cannot play HDR video. It's only playing in 4K because this is an LCD screen, but an M4 MacBook Pro is running in HDR. And take a look at the screen, let me know how is it in the comments below. I don't know if it's replicating the screen, but here it's definitely obvious that the greens, the way the color is shown on the M4 MacBook Pro is much more lively and it's much more true to color rather than the 2020 MacBook Air. The MacBook Air kind of has this washed out feeling that the colors are much more faded. I've got music opened up on both the computers. Now let's take a look at the sound quality on both these MacBooks. there you go, you heard the speakers for yourself. And by no means am I going to say that the 2020 Intel MacBook Air has bad speakers, but when you compare it to the M4 MacBook Pro, the listening experience and overall experience of the speaker quality and everything else just feels much better on the M4 MacBook Pro. The overall listening experience gives you a much more rich and vibrant feel compared to the Intel MacBook Air. The MacBook Air feels like just blasting sound, and the speaker experience just definitely feels much better on the M4 MacBook Pro, but that's my personal opinion. We've been shooting for close to an hour. Battery on the M4 MacBook Pro is at 83%, and the battery on the Intel MacBook Air is at 78%, and you can see right there it just dropped to 77. Another reason the M1 MacBook Pro is holding the battery for much longer is also because it has a slightly bigger battery compared to the Intel MacBook Air. And not just that, the power efficient and the power consumption on Apple Silicon is actually much more efficient compared to Intel MacBook Air. You get more performance per watt on the MacBook Pro. Not just that, with MagSafe you get a much faster charging, and if you're going to be buying the 120 watt adapter, then you're going to get a much higher charging speed on the M4 MacBook Pro. And on the Intel MacBook Air, it's just a normal 30 watt charger. So if you're going to be charging it up, it's going to be much faster on the Apple Silicon M4 MacBook Pro. So that being said, I think we have compared almost every single thing between these two MacBooks. And in the end, both the MacBooks are really good and powerful machines. And by no means am I going to say that the 2020 MacBook Air is really a bad laptop. When you compare it to the M4 MacBook Pro, it does lack in a lot of places, such as the screen, the battery life, thermal management. It definitely isn't as good as the MacBook Pro, but that doesn't mean it is bad. The Intel 2020 MacBook Air is still capable of doing a lot of multitasking, still a really usable computer even in 2025 right now. Even if all those Apple Silicons and all those good deals, it's still definitely worth it. So what I've seen in the used market, 2020 Intel MacBook Air definitely holds its value much more than the Apple Silicon. The Apple Silicon's value is just dropping down drastically, whereas the Intel MacBooks are really holding on to their value. So if you're looking for a good value machine, then maybe Intel MacBook Air might be a good option. And if you're planning on changing to Apple Silicon from the Intel MacBooks, then I think it will probably be a slightly better value. But in the end, if you're having a 2020 Intel MacBook Air and if you're planning on upgrading, sole reason should just be performance. Other than that, I mean, I would definitely not say don't upgrade to Apple Silicon. You should definitely upgrade to Apple Silicon because it does have its own benefits. But maybe if you're having this laptop, you might really want to consider changing to Apple Silicon. Maybe just hold on to your MacBook, just use it for a longer time, use it for what you paid for. That's actually been my comparison 2020 Intel MacBook Air with the M4 MacBook Pro. I'm not sure how many people have done this kind of comparison, but if you like this comparison, I really feel that a lot of people would really benefit from this, because not a lot of you are usually upgrading 4, 5, 6 or even 7, 8 years once because MacBooks are just getting too good. I've seen people who are using 2011 MacBook Pros even now. So yeah, if you're going to be upgrading from 2020 MacBook Air, if you're considering the M4 MacBook Pro, then maybe here's your comparison. Here is the performance difference. I hope this video helped you. If you like what you remember to click the like button, get subscribed, turn on notifications so you get notified whenever I post videos. Thank you so much for watching. Catch all of you in the next one. Bye bye.